I just found out my wife's affair with her boss, who's secretly been siphoning off $250, $0 from our family estate for years. Now she's trying to fight me over the $1.5 million inheritance, claiming I'm the one betraying her. I never thought I'd be the guy to find out my wife was cheating on me, let alone with her boss, and then discover he'd been siphoning off $500,000 from our family estate for years. It all started with little things: missed calls, secretive texts, her changing her phone password overnight. I always suspected something was off, but I never imagined it would come to this level of betrayal. Her name's Lisa. We met in college, got married about 10 years ago, and for the most part I thought we had a solid life. She was always a little bitchy, demanding, and quick to lie when it suited her, but I loved her. We had a nice house, good jobs, and a couple of kids. But then, slowly, I started noticing her phone was more glued to her hand than ever, and she was acting weird around her boss, Mark. It all tipped over the edge about 2 months ago. I'd been out of town on a business trip and I called her to say goodnight. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of another man's voice in the background, loud and clear. I froze. I could hear her laughing, teasing, then the unmistakable sound of her saying something about secrecy and not letting him find out. I hung up immediately, my stomach twisting like a knot. The next day I started digging. I checked her phone, her messages, her emails. What I found was worse than I expected. There were dozens of texts with Mark, flirty, suggestive, sometimes outright explicit. She was talking about having sex with him, about how she loved the thrill, how she wanted to keep it secret. She lied to my face when I confronted her, said it was just a fling, a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to go this far, that she was just stressed, that it was nothing serious. But I knew better. The real shock was the money. I found bank statements showing transfers from her account to an account under Mark's name, small at first, then growing larger, over $250, $0 siphoned off our family estate. I never suspected Mark was stealing from us, especially not for years. I always thought he was just a good boss, a friend of Lisa. Turns out, he was the one pulling all the strings and Lisa was complicit. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years we spent building a life, investing in our future, and she was out there screwing her boss and helping him steal from us. The betrayal cut deep, but what made it worse was her denial. She kept insisting she was innocent, that Mark was just a business associate, that she was only having an affair because she was lonely and bored, and that she never knew he was stealing money. I couldn't believe her lies. I'd caught her red-handed and she still tried to spin it. That's when I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. Not with my money, not with my feelings, not with my life. I was furious but also numb. I didn't know what to do at first, whether to confront her again, whether to call the police about the theft, whether to just walk away. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just a betrayal of my marriage. She had dragged our entire future into the dirt. I started thinking about revenge, about how I could make her pay for what she'd done, not just emotionally but financially. I wasn't going to let her walk away with our money, acting like she was the victim. That's when I began to formulate a plan. I knew I had to act smart, gather more evidence, and prepare for the fight ahead. I didn't want her to get away with this, not without consequences. And that's where I am now, sitting here trying to process everything while secretly planning my next move. I've gone from feeling numb to boiling with rage. I never thought I'd be in this position, but here I am, ready to fight back. Because if she thinks she can lie and cheat her way out of this, she's got another thing coming. The more I dug into her phone and bank accounts, the clearer it became how deep her deception went. I found a trail of messages, emails, and financial transactions that painted a damning picture. It was like peeling back layers of a lie she'd carefully constructed over the years. I started noticing patterns: how she'd meet Mark in secret, how she'd lie about her whereabouts, and how she'd always find a way to cover her tracks. The worst part: she was so good at it, so convincing in her lies, that I almost doubted myself at times. One night I decided to follow her. I didn't tell her I was onto her yet. I just wanted to see where she was going. It was late, around 10 p.m., and she said she was meeting a friend for drinks. I watched her leave the house, her heels clicking on the pavement, her purse hanging over her shoulder like she was heading out for a fun night. Instead, I tailed her discreetly. She drove to a fancy hotel downtown, checked in under a fake name, and stayed there for hours. I parked across the street, watching her through the window. That's when I saw Mark walk into the hotel. They went straight to her room. I felt my blood boil. I took pictures through my phone, proof of everything. I couldn't believe she'd been so reckless, so blatant. It was all right there in front of me, and I realized I had to act fast before she covered her tracks even more. The next morning, I confronted her. I waited until she was home, then I laid it all out: photos, bank statements, the texts. Her face froze in shock, then twisted into anger. She threw her head back and yelled, "You're crazy. You're just jealous because I'm still attractive and you're not satisfying me anymore." She tried to deny everything, but I had enough evidence to drown her in her own lies. Her reaction was so typical: bitchy, defensive, full of insults. She tried to turn it around, saying I was the one betraying her, that I'd been distant, that I didn't appreciate her. She called me paranoid. She said I was overreacting and that Mark was just a friend. But I knew better. I told her I'd caught her red-handed and I was done with her bullshit. I told her I was going to take everything: our house, the money, her reputation. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Her response: she started crying, fake tears streaming down her face, begging me not to ruin her life. She said I was the real villain, that I'd been controlling and dismissive. She accused me of cheating on her with my secretary, which is laughable because I hadn't even looked at another woman in years. But she's good at spinning stories. She's always been a master manipulator. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head: the lies, the betrayal, the money. I felt hurt, furious, and betrayed all at once. How could she do this to me, to us, to our family? I realized I'd been blind for too long. I'd trusted her, loved her, but she'd been planning her escape with Mark all along. I decided I had to get my ducks in a row. I reached out to a lawyer, started documenting everything. I knew I had to be smart, wait for the right moment to strike, to take control of the situation. I also started thinking about how I'd confront Mark. I didn't want to do anything reckless, but I was already planning my next moves. This wasn't just about catching her in a lie anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and making her pay for what she'd done. And then the real shock came. I found out that Mark had been siphoning off more than I thought, close to $250, $0 over the years. That was the tip of the iceberg. I realized he'd been stealing from me and my family for so long, and Lisa had known about it. She'd helped him cover it up, lied to me, and betrayed everything we built. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How did I not see this coming? How did I let her manipulate me for so long? I knew I had to act fast. The pieces were falling into place, and I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. I was ready to fight, ready to take everything back and make her regret every lie, every betrayal. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. Not even a little bit. And I was determined to make her pay for it. After I confronted Lisa with all the evidence, things got even messier. She threw a fit, screaming that I was overreacting, that I was just jealous of her success, and that I was trying to ruin her life. She looked me dead in the eyes and lied through her teeth, claiming she never had an affair, that Mark was just a business associate, and that the money was all a mistake, some kind of accounting error she'd recently discovered. Yeah, right, I knew better. I'd seen the texts, the bank transfers, the hotel receipts. There was no denying it anymore. Her lies only made me angrier. I felt a flood of betrayal, like my entire world was collapsing. I'd been so blind for so long, trusting her, believing in us. But now I saw her for what she really was: a selfish, manipulative woman who'd thrown everything away for a thrill and a quick buck. I couldn't believe I'd spent years building a life with someone who'd betray me so ruthlessly. I decided I wasn't going to let her spin her way out of this. I told her I was done playing nice, that I was going to get a lawyer and start the divorce process. I also told her I'd be reporting her to the authorities for the theft and her involvement with Mark. Her face went pale and she started crying again, fake tears this time. She begged me not to do anything, to give her a chance to explain, to work things out. But I knew better. Trust was dead and I wasn't going to be fooled again. That night I sat alone, feeling a mix of rage, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. I realized I'd been a fool for so long, believing in her, defending her, trying to make things work. But she'd been planning her escape right under my nose. I couldn't ignore the fact that she'd been lying about everything, about her feelings, her fidelity, even her intentions. I was hurt, but at the same time, I felt a strange clarity. I knew I had to cut her out of my life completely. The next step was gathering more evidence for the divorce and to ensure I could recover as much of the money as possible. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Mark's finances and to see if there was more theft I hadn't uncovered yet. Turns out, Mark had been siphoning off money for years, and Lisa was right there helping him cover it up. I found out that Mark had a secret offshore account, and I was able to trace some of the stolen money flowing into it. I felt sick knowing how deep this corruption went. I also started talking to a financial advisor to assess how much I could recover and how to protect what was left. I knew this was going to be a long, ugly fight, but I was ready. I had to stand my ground because I refused to let her walk away with a dime of my hard-earned money. I also began to prepare myself emotionally. I knew I'd be feeling a roller coaster of feelings, anger, sadness, maybe even guilt, but I couldn't let those feelings control me. In the meantime, Lisa kept trying to spin her stories, playing the victim, claiming I was the one cheating, the one betraying her. She accused me of trying to ruin her reputation and even threatened to take the kids if I pushed too hard. That was the last straw. I told her she was a liar and a thief, and she'd have to answer for her actions. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I also started secretly recording our conversations, not for revenge alone, but because I knew she'd lie her way out of anything. I wanted irrefutable proof of her manipulations. Her accusations, her lies. It was a dirty game, but I had no choice. I couldn't trust her and I had to protect myself and my children from her chaos. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I filed for divorce, served her papers, and began the legal fight to reclaim our money and assets. Meanwhile, I kept my distance, trying to stay calm and focused. Every time she called or texted, I kept my responses minimal. I refused to get pulled into her drama. Instead, I concentrated on building a plan to get through this mess, to come out stronger on the other side. What struck me most was how much her betrayal hurt, but also how much I learned about resilience. I realized that I'd been giving her too much power for too long, and now I was taking control back. I wasn't going to let her destroy what we had, what I still believed was worth fighting for. But I also knew that moving on meant letting go of the past and accepting that my life would never be the same again. The trust was shattered and rebuilding would take time. So here I am, standing at a crossroads. The fight isn't over, but I'm determined to see it through. I want justice, and I want to protect what's left of my family's future. I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away, even when it's painful. And I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to make sure she never does this to me or anyone else again. The legal process moved faster than I expected, probably because I had all the evidence laid out in front of me: texts, bank records, hotel receipts, and recordings. I could see the wheels turning in the lawyer's office as he outlined my options. The theft, the affair, the lies. It was all enough to get a solid case for divorce and financial restitution. But what hit me hardest was realizing how much I'd been blind for so long. I kept asking myself, how did I let this happen? How could I have been so naive? Lisa, of course, was not making things any easier. She went into full victim mode, crying and begging, claiming I was trying to ruin her life, that she was the real victim here. She threw around accusations that I had been unfaithful, that I'd been distant, that I didn't love her anymore. She even accused me of having an affair with my secretary, completely false, but her lies kept coming. Honestly, I was past caring about her accusations. Her words bounced off me like bullets. She was desperate, trying anything to regain control, but I knew better now. I started to realize that her entire persona was built on manipulation. She lied so much, I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I saw her trying to spin stories to the kids, saying I was abusive, controlling. It made me sick. I could see the damage she was trying to do, trying to turn everyone against me, but I refused to be pulled into her web. I stayed calm and focused on my plan. I wasn't going to let her drag me down into her chaos. Meanwhile, I kept digging into Mark's finances. I discovered that he had an offshore account, hidden investments, and more stolen money than I initially thought, closer to $300, $0 now. I hired a forensic accountant to help trace every dollar. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. That money could have been saved, invested, used for our kids' futures. Instead, it was lining Mark's pockets and fueling Lisa's lies. I also started secretly recording our conversations. I knew she'd lie her way out of anything, so I needed irrefutable proof. It was uncomfortable, feeling like I was spying on her, but I had no choice. I had to protect myself and my children from her manipulations. Every conversation, every meeting, I kept my composure and recorded. The more I listened back, the clearer it became how much she'd been lying all along. One day she showed up at my office, crying and begging me to drop the divorce, promising she'd change, that she loved me and she'd never do anything like this again. I just looked at her and said, "You lied, you cheated, and you stole from us. I don't believe anything you say anymore." That's when she really lost it, screaming that I was ruining her life, that I was a monster. But I knew better. I'd seen her true face now, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. In the meantime, I started to prepare emotionally. I reached out to a therapist to help me process what I was going through. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal, but I also knew I had to stay strong for my kids. I didn't want them to see me broken, even if I felt that way inside. I told myself I'd get through this, I'd come out stronger, and I'd rebuild what she'd tried to destroy. The hardest part was facing the reality that our marriage was over. I'd loved her, believed in us, but she'd thrown it all away for some affair and greed. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But I also knew I had to focus on the future, on protecting what I still had left and making sure she didn't get away with it all. I was determined to fight for my rights, my dignity, and my peace of mind. Every day, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing I had a battle ahead. But I also woke up knowing I wasn't going to let her win. I had evidence, I had a plan, and I was ready to see this through to the end. The betrayal hurt like hell, but I refused to let it break me. I'd learned that sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to confront the truth head-on, no matter how ugly it is. And I was prepared to do just that. The legal battles dragged on, but each day I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. I kept pushing forward, knowing that I had the evidence, the legal backing, and the clarity to finally put an end to this nightmare. Lisa's attempts to manipulate the situation only fueled my determination. She kept calling, begging, crying, trying to guilt-trip me into dropping everything, promising she'd change, claiming she was sorry and that she loved me. But honestly, her words were hollow now. I'd heard too many lies, seen too much deception. One afternoon, I finally sat down with my lawyer and laid out the full picture. How Lisa had helped Mark siphon off hundreds of thousands of dollars, how she'd lied about everything, and how her accusations of my infidelity were nothing but desperate attempts to distract from her own guilt. The lawyer nodded, and I felt a flicker of hope. We filed for divorce, demanded full financial restitution, and prepared for a serious fight over the assets. Meanwhile, I also started to distance myself from Lisa completely. I told her I wanted nothing to do with her until she was honest and took responsibility for her actions. She responded with more tears and accusations, but I didn't care anymore. I had no patience for her manipulations. I knew I'd have to be firm if I wanted to protect myself and my kids from her lies. One of the most shocking revelations came when I got access to the offshore account Mark had been hiding. It was a treasure trove of stolen money, and I found even more evidence of her complicity. I discovered that she had been receiving regular bribe payments from Mark, another layer of her betrayal. It was sickening. I realized that her entire persona was built on lies. She'd been lying to me, to our friends, to herself. I also started reaching out to the bank and law enforcement to report the theft. I wanted to make sure Mark faced consequences, that he couldn't keep stealing from others. It was a complicated process, but I was determined to see it through. I knew that exposing Mark's criminal activity could also help me recover some of the stolen money. Throughout all this, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss, not just for the money but for the trust I'd lost. I kept replaying all the moments I'd thought were normal, her smile, her laughter, the times she told me she loved me, and realizing how much of it was a lie. It hurt more than I expected. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, but I also knew that I had to stay focused. I owed it to myself and my kids to get through this. My friends and family stepped in, offering support, even if they couldn't believe how blind I'd been for so long. They told me to stay strong, to fight for what's right, and to remember that I deserved better. I started seeing a therapist to help process the emotional toll. Sometimes I'd wake up feeling numb, other times I'd be consumed by rage. But each day I pushed myself to keep going, knowing this was only part of the journey. The most challenging part was accepting that I might never fully trust her again, even if she somehow tried to make amends. The damage was done. I realized that forgiveness wasn't an option anymore, not in the way I once thought. I had to focus on protecting myself, on rebuilding my life, and on ensuring she couldn't hurt me or our kids again. Now, I'm at a point where I'm ready to finalize the divorce. I want closure, I want the truth out in the open, and I want to move forward without the weight of her lies dragging me down. The process has been exhausting, but I've learned so much about myself. I've learned that resilience is real, that sometimes you have to face the ugly truth head-on, and that real strength comes from standing your ground even when it feels like everything's falling apart. I still feel the sting of betrayal every day, but I also feel a flicker of hope. Hope that I can rebuild, that I can find happiness again, and that I can finally put this chapter behind me. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I know I won't let her or anyone else take me down again. I've been through hell, but I'm still standing. That's what matters now. The finalization of everything has been a whirlwind. The divorce papers are signed, the settlement is being processed, and I finally feel like I'm starting to breathe again. What's strange is how much I've changed through this ordeal, how much I've learned about myself, about trust, and about resilience. I used to think that love meant blind devotion, but now I see it's about honesty, respect, and integrity. Lisa's betrayal shattered that illusion, but it also forced me to reevaluate what I want and deserve. Looking back, I can't help but feel a mixture of anger, disappointment, and relief. Anger at her for the lies and stealing, disappointment that I ever trusted her so blindly, and relief that I finally see the truth. The pain of betrayal still lingers, but it's tempered by a newfound strength I never knew I had. I'm not the same person I was before, and honestly, I don't want to be. The money she and Mark stole was a huge blow, but I've managed to recover some of it through legal channels and insurance claims. The rest I've accepted as a loss, part of the lesson I needed to learn. I've started rebuilding my savings, focusing on my kids, and trying to move forward. It's not easy. Every day brings reminders of what I lost, but also opportunities to create something new. My kids are my anchor through all of this. They're still young, but I've tried to shield them from the worst of it. I want them to know that even in the face of betrayal, life goes on. I've been honest with them in age-appropriate ways, emphasizing that their dad loves them and is doing everything possible to keep their world safe. Seeing their smiles and hearing their laughter reminds me why I have to stay strong, because they deserve stability and love, not chaos. I've also started dadding again, cautiously. It's strange to think about trusting someone new after all this, but I realize I can't live in fear forever. I want to find happiness again, not with Lisa, not through revenge, but through genuine connection and mutual respect. It's a slow process, and I know I'll carry scars for a while, but I'm finally ready to move on. The biggest lesson I've learned is that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and it's up to you to pick yourself up afterward. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair the same way. But you can rebuild your life, piece by piece, stronger than before. I've come to accept that. Some relationships aren't meant to last, and that's okay. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and focus on your own healing. Looking back, I realized that I was naive for a long time, trusting blindly, ignoring red flags, believing in fairy tale endings. But now I see the world more clearly. Life isn't perfect and people aren't always who they seem. But I also see that I'm capable of surviving even the darkest storms. I've faced the worst and come out the other side. And I know that no matter what happens next, I will be okay. So, to anyone reading this who's going through something similar, trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Betrayal hurts, but it doesn't have to define you. You're stronger than you think, and with time, healing is possible. Life will go on, and so will you.